Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to say a few things, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Amanda Rose Birael. Wave to us, Amanda Rose, where you are, yeah. We are, like I said before, we're really happy that you're all here with us this afternoon. For the first of our 3 listening sessions, I am Tammy Meneghini, and I am speaking to you from Louisville, Colorado, territories of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho native tribal areas. And I think it's apropos that as I was reading more about the tribal lands and the people that inhabited where I live, they were greatly known as peacemakers. And a large part of our process and our project with the Rocky Mountain Artists Safety Alliance is about creating peace and creating equity and safer spaces in theater. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I do want to, you all see, or you may be able to see Kara and Michelle, our ASL interpreters. Want to thank them for being with us today and for providing us with that assistance. I also want to give a thank you out to our partners that are working with us, that have been working with us. Lisa Young from Idea Stages, who is going to lead with her panelists the session at 4 o'clock today. Annie Jacobs, there she is. Annie Jacobs, who is with Phamaly Theatre. If you all didn't see the article in the Denver Post yesterday about Phamaly, take a look at it. It was amazing. Annie's been part of our team. Leah Kosach from CTG. Leah is down there from the Colorado Theater Guild. And then my partners, Amanda Rose and Angela Astle. All right, Amanda Rose, I'm going to share my screen and turn it over to you.
There we go.
I know you're seeing my edit mode. I'm going to be totally, so there we go. Now we're good. Okay, take it away.
Awesome. Hi, y'all. First of all, hello. Thank you for being here. Today, I'm coming from Westminster, which is in the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute nations. As we gather today, we acknowledge that there's a painful history of genocide and forced removal from the territories on which we are most likely currently sitting. We respect that although we're gathering digitally, we are likely seated or standing at a computer on colonized lands. And we want to acknowledge that there are many diverse Indigenous people still connected to these lands. We renew and reaffirm and give thanks to all the tribal nations and all the ancestors of the many places from which we're coming today. So we invite you in the chat. We have shared some links that list out the historic tribes of Colorado, and we invite you all to take a look at that and share where you are from, or share the additional tribes from territories where you are situated if you're not in Colorado. So we just want to invite you to take a second and see where you are situated and give honor to the lands on which you are currently situated. And I sent those links to the chat moments ago, so those should be available to all of you.
Great.
While you do that, I just want to echo that we are gathering today to specifically chat about the Colorado Theater Standards. I just gestured to my own screen, and I'm sure you can see that on yours as well. And we thank you for being here for the first of our 3 conversations for the weekend. And with all of that being said, I think that I am handing it off to Erin Joy Swank from the Stage Managers Association to do what stage managers always do so thoroughly and so well, and walk us through some of the logistics for this session.
Yeah, so if you haven't done Zoom or don't know much about Zoom, if you hover over the bottom of the screen is where you can pop up the chat feature as well as the participants to see who's here. Anyone who is a co-host and with a live mic will be popped towards the top if you want to know their names to send them a private chat. The chat at the bottom, you'll have a drop-down choice of whether you wanted to talk to everybody or just to panelists or individual people. And we can utilize, let's put our questions, this is a web meeting format rather than a webinar that has a Q&A. So if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat if you want. If you want them to be anonymous, you can drop them to me and I'll hold on to them, or Amanda Rose, either one of us, and we'll hold on to them later. We will be stopping every so often to answer your questions. And we probably won't utilize the raise hand feature. So get that out of your system if that's one of the ways you normally do things. That's all I got.
That's great. We want to encourage you all. We're going to stop with these little chat checks, and as we go through our short sessions, and encourage you to reach out via the chat. Amanda Rose and Aaron are watching on the chat, and we'll take time if there are conversations starting, if there are questions, or if there are comments. I just want to re-emphasize that we really, when we thought about these sessions, we called them listening sessions, because although we're sharing some of the information about the work that we've done with the Colorado Theater Standards or the Community Standards for Theater, we're sharing with you some of that information. We're also giving lots of space and time to hear from you. And so we'll take little breaks along the way. I've called them chat checks. To check in with Amanda Rose and Aaron Joy. And certainly Amanda and Aaron Joy, if you guys see anything in the chat that you're like, hey, we need to stop and talk about this, we will do that too. We're all theater people, so we know how to be super flexible. So I think I'll just, the group we have here today, the first of the listening sessions, Safer in Theater, Colorado Theater Standards, as Amanda Rose said. We're going to give you sort of a brief overview of the document, of the work, of the practices that have seemed to have worked well in the past year that people have been using components of the document, and then allow for space for you to give us some feedback and provide us with some thoughts that you have. All right. Hold on, there we go. You can find our document at our website, www.rockymountainasa.org. If you go to our website, you can click on the document there. Chances are some of you got the document and have already looked at it. If you haven't, that's where you can get it. And we want to let you know the reason that we have it available through our website is so that we can know who you are and we can follow up with you, because it is a living, breathing document. It's something we've been working on, we'll continue to work on. We know there are parts of it that we need to continue to define in alignment with our own community. And so we want to hear back from you when you are able to use it or read it. The goals for today's listening session are, if you don't know about us, the Rocky Mountain Artist Safety Alliance, we want you to know about us after this little meeting. We want you to know a little bit more about the document, and certainly if you want to know more after this meeting, you'll know how to get it at our website. How are we doing with the chat, people? Are we okay? I included this quote, this Maya Angelou quote: develop enough courage so that you can stand up for yourself and then stand up for someone else. Because we often get asked, how did this start? And, you know, in a way, in March, when we entered this world of COVID-19 and lockdown, we started getting more and more inquiry about the work that we were doing. And also it sort of kicked us and encouraged us to reach out more. I included this quote because the history of the project really came from students. Many of us are educators or in education, from other people in the business, in the field, that were saying, this thing happened to me and it didn't feel quite right. What do you think about it? And this was happening more and more. And I think between the three of us, Amanda Rose, Virael, Angela Astle, myself, we knew that it was feeling like it was really time to do something. So we're going to share with you briefly a little bit about the process of putting together, of doing our work. Our work it had three phases to it. The purpose, we had a purpose for the document. We had the implementation phase where we were sharing the document with others, and then the current use and where we are today. The introduction of the document, I just gave you a little bit of history. A little bit of the background of the work was after the three of us became introduced to each other, we reached out to our friends at Not in Our House in Chicago. My background, I have a background in Chicago. A lot of the members brought Chicago with them. And we reached out to the people who were part of the development of the Chicago theater standards. Hence, we have the Colorado theater standards, because they were really greatly inspired by particularly one person with Chicago theater standards who came out to Colorado and worked with us and got us started. And then basically handed us the work and said, it's yours, you can use this, or you can make something for your community. And that's what we decided to do. We invited people to sit at the table with us at little conference rooms, at the Dairy Center on Zoom, before Zoom was like a norm. And we started to talk about what areas of the document from Chicago theater standards work well, which areas of it we really want to shape and listen to our community and make better for our region. So that's what we did for about a year. We had those conversations and we put together the document that you see on our website. And there are things about that document that are constantly being edited and changed, and we include that feedback from you. I'm going to turn it over to Angela to talk a little bit more about the implementation of the process. Are you there?
I'm going to pause this for just a minute. We've got a spotlight on the interpreter, which I think is the wrong thing to do. So now we're only seeing the interpreter. So I'm going to pause this just for a minute while we figure this out.
Okay.
And make sure that everybody is seeing.
Okay. Amanda Rose, do we have anything in the chat while they're switching over? Good.
We are good in the chat. The website for the Rocky Mountain ASA has been shared in the chat, just so everybody knows. And we have tried to signal to everyone that Michelle is now signing. If you need to pin her video, you can do so.
And yes, Kara used the pin feature rather than the spotlight feature. I think that was the issue.
And it looks like people can see all of us and the shared screen now. So I think we are good to go.
Okay.
Cool. Well, hi, everybody. I'm learning so much more about Zoom than I knew. So this is also a great learning curve too. So yeah, so I'm going to share with you about the implementation and kind of the process of what we did. And as Tammy said, we started with meetings. We invited the entire theater community, anybody who wanted to participate, to join us at the table to basically go through the document that was the Not in Our House specific document from Chicago. And of course, as we started doing the deeper dive into the document, we also started figuring out that there were more voices needed at the table from the different departments of theater. The document leaned heavily toward actors and definitely was inspired from that perspective. And as it grew, it broadened to include the other art forms of theater, such as design and production management. And we certainly work to include those voices into the conversation that we were having, but definitely knew that we weren't going to be able to become a one-stop shop with it without it actually being implemented. And so we planned on getting the document to what we called as final of a state as it could be, with everybody who was involved in the process. And these were theater makers, as I said, from all different departments. And then the hope was to be able to roll it out with actual theater productions, using the document and then giving us that feedback that was saying, you know what, you really missed something here. We've had this come up in conversation, just so that we could really capitalize on the brain power of community and those doing the work and utilizing the document. So that process was set up via a Google form. So right now, if you're trying to access the document on our website, you're going to put your contact information in there to get the document, so that we're able then to follow up with you after a production or even during a production with a series of questions that will allow us to continue to help create a document that is more reflective of what our community needs. And so with that, being able to contact folks, it is also why the document isn't just out there for anybody to grab and go, go use, because we really are trying to build it together so that it becomes, as thoughtful of a document as we can put out there. The second thing that I would say as far as implementation is that it really does come down to the theater companies being willing at all levels to use this document. And Amanda Rose will talk about a couple of highlights of the document in particular that we found through those that are using it to be helpful in terms of opening up communication and dialogue in a type of art form that has a lot of hierarchy associated with it. Obviously, we all know the roles of directors and stage managers and producers and how that tends to sit in a dominant way above actors and everybody else. And what we're trying to do is just create space for leveling the playing field of those power dynamics with this document. The other thing that we hope is that folks that, whether you're actually running a theater company as a producer or a director or not, the reality is that it does work when multiple people know about it. So we need actors to be able to go to a theater and say, hey, are you using the Colorado theater standards? Because those producers may not be. And if the actor is speaking up and inquiring about it, we hope that that creates the additional interest and support so that we can all get on the same page in terms of what our values are as a theater community and how we show up and how we agree to treat each other in this process. So please, please do request a copy of the document after this so that you can do that deeper dive and be an advocate for both yourself and also for getting as many theater companies on board as possible. Am I missing anything, team members?
No, that's great. That's no, that's great. And I think just to reemphasize what Angela said and to say the purpose of the document for us all along was really to not define how we make art, but to really refine and redefine how we treat each other in spaces and be aware of how we treat each other in spaces and create those systems where we are behaving responsibly and kindly and respectfully towards one another. And that is in the document, the very beginning of the document on page 3, there is a purpose of our statement. And we were real clear from the beginning, as Angela said, that this sense of awareness and the things that were already put in place, like Amanda Rose said yesterday, the nice write-up that was done in the Westward about, we're trained early on to be easy to work with and say yes, and even when you go, oh, wow, that feels a little funny. So to say, wow, well, I'm not sure about that. So we were really looking for those spaces where we were questioning that it didn't feel necessarily good for us to be in those spaces. Yeah, so I think that's great.
Can I just add one other thing, Tammy, in that we also were clear that the implementation of the document itself has to come from the companies themselves to use it. As an entity, we organized as Rocky Mountain Artist Safety Alliance to truly be an alliance with multiple organizations to, as it turns out, to talk about safety on all levels of what does that look like in theater. But we did not organize in a way to be monitoring, if you will, what theater companies are doing. We really believe that the theater companies and the actors and the artists that are creating work, as Tammy said, have the ability to create on the levels that they need to, and that it really is about embracing those values of how we're treating each other through that creation process. So as an entity, our job is to get the word out about the document and to answer any questions or any bumps that come up along the way, because we do know of other entities that are using it, so we can draw on best practices from multiple sources. But our job is not to go tell on any organization and be like, well, they're not using it and this one is, and we're not trying to police it, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And Amanda Rose, you want to talk a little bit about where we are today in phase 3? Where are you?
Hello, I should be popping up any minute now. There we go. Hi everyone, I just shared with you all the link to the current document in the chat if you would like to peruse it while we go through this. What we are currently doing as this is implemented is the document has been implemented at several different companies throughout our area, including CU Boulder and the Catamounts, which is funny because Amanda Berg-Wilson just popped into the chat, so that was great timing. And this document is being used as far north as Washington State, and we also know that there are organizations using this document in New Mexico. So what we're doing is we're allowing people to use the document, we are promoting the concept that people use this document, and we are really wanting this document to be utilized widely and spread as one person thinks it's useful, spread to other people so that we can create an inward outward change in our industry. That being said, we also know that we only do what we know how to do, and we can't do better until we know better. And we admit that those of us who wrote this document don't know everything, and we're really open to feedback. So part of the reason that this document isn't being plastered everywhere digitally at the moment is that we're hoping people will come to us so that we know who's using the document, so that then we can reach out and seek your feedback, because you're the creators who are as deep as you currently are. Typically you're probably forehead deep in creating and producing and performing and all of the different jobs that you do. Right now, people are in various stages of that. So we're hoping that when you're creating and when you're using the document, you will provide us feedback so that we know what's working well in the document and so that we can adjust what needs adjusting, because better is better, and we will only be able to do better once we know better. So we're really at that point right now where we're hoping people use the document and provide us feedback so that we can improve it. That being said, when big changes to the document are made, we will then send it out to all the people who have previously received earlier versions of the document. So that's why it's not just plastered everywhere. We're hoping people will reach out to us to get the document, and that way we can track that and update our whole community when we receive updates.
Yes. And I also thank you so much, Amanda Rose. That is all true. And I love Amanda Berg-Wilson. Thank you so much for, we do feel like we trust our community in sharing our work and creating this stronger community together, this community of knowing how we treat each other. And that we, the expectation is really that we continue to be better at communicating with each other about how it's working. I also just want to say, we are not pretending ever to say we didn't get anything from the Chicago Theater Standards. We did. They inspired us tremendously. And we hope that you look at both and you compare both. What we did when we started was we took that document, we sat down with our friends at the table and we went through and we changed things as the conversation emerged. And it will continue to change and build, obviously, as things are changing and building and growing. Obviously the health and safety area probably is going to be, it's going to be changing. And there are other parts of the document that we hope to continue to grow and change. So yes, and the big thing is that the document's for you. And it's for you because we expect you to use it. Amanda Berg-Wilson, again, she's going to talk to us later on, share how Catamounts was able to use a part of it and shape it and make it work for something they were doing. So you'll hear firsthand from somebody who was able to do that with a portion of the document. And so part of our work is really advocacy to getting the community to have more voice and more, standing up for these practices. And so advocacy is a big component of this project, I would say, for our organization and for our bigger theater, our beloved theater community at large, right here in the Rocky Mountain region. All right, I'm going to go on, Amanda Rose, unless you stop me and tell me we need to talk about things. I don't see a look. Okay, great. All right,
We're good
and
in the
I
chat.
do. What's that? See that?
We are all good in the chat.
Okay, great. All right, so who is this document for? Because I know there's some people on the call, you know, equity, non-equity, community theater, professional theater, outdoor theater, you know, classrooms. Who's it for? Well, it's really for anyone who wants to utilize it. We have found, you know, where I am, I'm also on the faculty at the University of Colorado Boulder, where I work with some great colleagues that immediately when we started researching this work and we started breaking apart the Chicago Theater Standards document to make our own, my colleagues at UC Boulder were like, hey, we wanna try some of these things. So as we were developing them at the table at Ramasa, CU was trying some of these things out in our performance, rehearsal, and audition practices. So it's really for, you know, as we've said numerous times, it's for the community. I'm going to just read to you, if I may, a little bit from the document. It's a non-binding set of principles reflecting the continually evolving interest to establish standards in theater spaces. So that could be any space where you create a performance. It could even be a Zoom space. Particularly those spaces that do not have human resource departments or other institutionalized mechanisms to prevent or respond to unsafe environments or harassment. The document is not an agreement or a contract. It's intended as a vehicle by which organizations can demonstrate their desire to apply standards, prevention, and resolution procedures that are identifiable, reproducible, uniform, and shared among a wider theater community. So it's pretty broad who the document is for and how you can use it. And we'll hear a little bit more firsthand experience of how it has been used. CU has used 3 of the parts of the document pretty exclusively. How to use it. The sections of the document seek to, they define terms, they provide timelines. So if you think about it, you know, the process with the Colorado Theater Standards is that it starts when you're sitting at the table talking about season titles, and it goes all the way through until the last board is picked up from the set or the last nail is put away. It's a continuum from the very, very beginning to the end of how we treat each other and how we behave in our spaces together as an artistic team. It's shared wisdom with the companies that have piloted the document and offer suggestions to get started. So how we are using the document, my team at Ramasa, that we are using it to share the love, if you will, and then listen to how people are using it and how people find it not helpful. We want to know that too. We want to know what works and what doesn't work so well. Erin was great, Erin Joy Swank, as a stage manager. Tammy, these things here, this is a little, we need to work on these things. So we know that there are areas that we need to continue to change. And we've said that several times. All right. The purpose of this session, and we're going to do this, our goal was to get through this and then have time to listen to you and talk to you, or listen, because we're talking to you a lot right now, or at least I feel like I am, is to highlight 3 of the standards in particular: the conflict resolution path, or the CRP, and it's called the CRP in the document, the NED, or the non-equity deputy, and the basic health and safety standard. How are we doing, Amanda Rose, with the chat? Erin? Great. Okay.
It's all very good. We're very excited. Lisa put in I'm going to say it out loud so it's on the video.
Yeah.
If you text the phone number 907-312-508. No?
That's 917, isn't it?
No, I worked it with 907. It worked for me.
No, you're right. I'm going to be quiet.
What is that? What does that mean?
907-312-5085, and you put in your city and state is what I did, spelling out Colorado, if that makes a difference. And it texts you back, in Aurora, Colorado, you are on Arapaho Cheyenne word I'm going to learn how to pronounce that in parentheses says Ute after it, and another word I'm going to learn how to pronounce that says Sioux after it. And then
That's
so we
a
are
track
all
one.
in the chat talking about that and trying to give each other pronunciation guides and things like that. So we're all very excited about that resource.
Great.
And that's been the main chat in the talk right now, or going on in the chat right now.
I think I'm just going to join the chat. I think that.
Yeah, the chat's fun.
What am I doing? I mean, yeah, Lisa.
That's a quick and easy way to do it. And someone, Leah, just actually put the other resource down in the chat too to find out your exact native lands. And it will also give you, like, I believe, like by tribe, I believe is how it will set out as opposed to like the umbrella. So, but that's just a really great way to, if you're starting your rehearsal process or anything and you need to find out your land acknowledgements, you can do it real quick on your phone.
Yep,
that's great.
The link is native-land.ca.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Lisa. Lisa's going to be leading you have a panel of your team, the Idea Stages team, today at 4 o'clock. And I'm not sure if I said your name at the beginning when I said the team member. So Lisa has been part of coordinating all of this too. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm not watching the chat at all, but I feel like I really want to watch the chat now. All right. So I guess I'll just continue a little bit more and then we'll open it up to the floor about more listening. The CRP has been really helpful for folks. I'm going to show you a sample of one here in a moment that we've used at CU and the Department of Theater and Dance, and has been used at a couple other universities in our region. The conflict resolution path is basically, it's not a dictated means of addressing all personal friction, but it is a documented communication pathway to address physical and mental safety, harassment, and other serious concerns in a production or within an organization. It seeks to inform participants what to do when they face serious issues, whom to address with such issues, and put in place a framework that dispels the fear of reprisal from reporting issues of safety, harassment, or other serious concerns. I like to think of it and think of this work, and I really have to give a lot of gratitude out to my colleagues and the people that I've met and been introduced to through this work, of just allowing myself to be open and stay curious and desire better communication. And that's what this CRP really, it does really well, is that it deals with creating these pathways towards better communication when there is conflict between people. There are 3 levels, and I'll show you our little, it's going to be really small. So I see that like most of you don't have your video up, so we won't see you doing this on the screen. So that's, you just saw my big head, but it's kind of small, but I thought it would be helpful for you to see sort of a sample one that we use at CU Boulder. And I know other companies have too, but because I work at CU and I have familiarity with this process, I'm sharing this one with you. So there you have the goal of the conflict resolution path. And I don't know if my colleague Connie Lane is on the call, but Connie, if you are, please, chime in whenever. I think I saw your name on the list, but so the goal is there, which I read you just a portion of, and then you have these 3 levels of communication. And I like to think of it right now, if you want to break it down really easily, level 1 is I'm going to work it out with that person. If I have an issue, if Angela and I are having a thing, we're going to try to work it out together. She's right next to my face right now in the Jumbotron, so I'm using you, Angela. So we're going to try to work it out together. We're going to try to talk to each other and address our concerns together. And hopefully that'll help foster a better relationship. We always say in theater, or I say, theater is about solving problems. If we don't know how to solve problems, what are we all here for? I'm not just making art. I'm trying to figure out how to solve these problems. So we're going to try to figure that out between the 2 of us. I like to use this analogy of Hamilton. So you got Hamilton and Burr, and they're trying to figure it out. They can't figure it out. So they got to send in their seconds, see that they can get their record straight. So we have Lawrence and we have Charles Lee. They go, or Charles Lee and Lawrence are the guys dueling, then Hamilton and Burr come in. So you have your seconds come in at level 2. And we've identified the seconds, and you can, and maybe Amanda Burke-Wilson can share with us, or others could share with us, you identify who those seconds are. In a lot of cases, it's the Ned, the non-equity deputy. it could be the equity deputy. Usually it's the non-equity deputy, a stage manager, maybe not the stage manager, production coordinator, and in many cases the director is not involved, but the director can be involved if that's the system that you've set up. And then you try to resolve the conflict with those individuals at the table. Hopefully that works. If that doesn't work, then you go to level 3, which I call the Washington level. George Washington has to come in and tell everybody to get out of here. That's not true. But we have the level where we get in our setup here, and in the scenario you're all looking at, we have our chair or our associate chair, and they become involved and they help solve it. So really what it's doing, and what we liked about it when we were sitting around talking about it was encouraging communication rather than saying, no, you're done, you're fired, you're out of here. It was really sort of, because the reality is a lot of us need help in communicating better, especially when we're placed in these environments where we're making this great art and we're doing these shows and then somebody messes up our mojo or our flow and we get, so really what the process of the CRP does is it helps to encourage and cultivate a culture of communication. And so I share this one with you. This is the version that we use at CU. There is a version in the document online, so you could, and I would imagine that many of you on this call today, you might have your own version of it, but this is something that has been, and we've heard back from people, something that works really well. Amanda, Rose, or Angela, do you want to add anything here?
Yeah, I would just like to add, I'll wait for a second until I pop up on screen. I did just share with everyone in the chat that there is downloadable versions of the CRP and audition disclosures and a couple other documents that you may find useful. Those are on our website, and I dropped a link to that in the chat. I'm pointing downwards. I don't know where your chat is, but mine is down. So I did just drop that into the chat. Yeah.
Okay, great. Do we have a little, Angela, any additions here?
I just called out what a cool tool this is, and just that we don't often get that kind of training to deal with conflict and handle conflict, or if it happens kind of behind the scenes and more hush hush. And I just really appreciate how this brings it to the forefront. And in that theme of, if we have something, we have a tool available in our toolbox to use to implement something so that we are creating that culture of communication. It's awesome. So
yeah.
And we did have a private chat question came in to me. I don't know if you're going to cover this later, but can you address the portions of the document that may ask companies to budget additional funds for intimacy coordinators and so on?
Yes, Amanda Rose is going to talk briefly about that. Yeah. So yes, we will get to that. We're going to touch on that. And then, Ramasa will have resources and links available. We do have some already on our website for more information about this important issue. I saw, Leah, I saw one thing in the chat, it's that somebody teaching musical theater, working with kids, that the CRP has been helpful. I think it's great. It's such a great tool in encouraging us to work things out. I have a 12-year-old son, and I use the things from the CRP with him all that, figure it out. And then figure it out with your friends. And then the moms have to come in, but the moms don't usually have to come in. So yes, so great, Amanda Rose. And so we will get to the intimacy, that's our next thing, unless, hey, you two, do we have anything else that we want to address in the chat? Anybody have any thoughts or things they'd like for us to, respond to? Great. Okay. Yeah, and there's a committee from Colorado Theater Guild and with Ramasa, Rocky Mountain Artist Safety Alliance. Some of the things that we have been doing, we've been going into first rehearsals, or we're available for consulting, or we're available to, just be an ear to listen, to help, organizations or groups that are trying to use the document or use elements of the document.
And as mentioned in the chat, there's a Colorado Theater Guild subcommittee that's working to help get this out and be known.
Yes, great. Thanks, Laura. Thanks for saying that. Okay, I think I'm gonna turn it over to Amanda Rose, who is going to, another thing that has worked really well with the documents that we have found and we've heard directly about from people, oh, I'm using the Ned. Theatrical intimacy are hot topics right now, and Amanda Rose is going to tell us a little bit more about that.
Sweet. Hi there, everybody. Again, still Amanda Rose. I use she, her pronouns. And as well as being part of the Rocky Mountain Artist Safety Alliance from the beginning, I'm also an intimacy choreographer. I specifically work with theatrical intimacy education. And I do want to touch on the fact that in our document, we have a full section that outlines best practices in approaching intimacy and violence and extreme movement on stage in a safe manner. One of the things that we do recommend is using an intimacy choreographer if you are not trained in how to use this, how to deal with intimacy. That being said, there's a lot of different schools of thought on staging intimacy, and there are a lot of different people. I will kick to Tammy because I can see her in the little square next to me, who have been doing the work around creating staged intimacy in a safe manner since before intimacy choreography became codified. So we acknowledge that in this document. There are plenty of you who have been doing this work and who really focus on safety. But the document is here to really support you because, as I said earlier, and I will say it probably a bazillion times for the rest of my life, when we know better, we can do better. And I know that prior to becoming involved with intimacy choreography officially through theatrical intimacy education, I was constantly trying to figure out better ways to create intimacy on stage in my own productions. So that being said, we have an entire section that goes through things that you should be considering, such as disclosures. And again, on that resources page that I shared in the chat a little while ago, there are some disclosure forms that you can look at and steal or adapt and use. Also, our document really focuses on doing what you can in the room. We really recommend bringing in a specialist. There is something coming down the pipes that I am not at liberty to tell you about right now because it has not gone public, but I highly recommend that you follow Theatrical Intimacy Education on their Facebook, on Twitter, or just via their website, because there's a very large announcement coming down the pike. I'm struggling with what I'm allowed to tell you. There's a group of us who are creating a resource through which you can hopefully access intimacy choreographers and specialists in your area and at different price points. So keep an eye out. I know I'm such a tease. I'm so sorry, but it's not my place to make that announcement publicly. So that being said, keep an eye out. There are groups of people throughout the country working to make it easier for you to know who in your area is doing this work, especially because IDI, Intimacy Directors International, which many of you may be familiar with, that was until very recently one of the large groups that ran certifications for intimacy choreographers, and they have since disbanded as an organization within the past few months. It's COVID, so I'm not really sure of my timeline right now, but there's something new coming down the pipeline, and the fact that that one organization has disbanded does not mean that you are on your own.
As we've listed in the chat, that's Theatrical Intimacy ED for like education.com.
And I think on Twitter they are at TI Educators, but I'm not 100% sure. So that being said, you are not alone. Our document is created for you to do what you can. And we've outlined in an entire section on staged intimacy and movement specialists, how you can go about contacting those people, finding those people, working with those people, and how you can continue doing what you're doing in the meantime. I'm supposed to be talking about the Ned. So the Ned is a non-equity deputy, and this was created for performance companies, production companies, small ensembles who maybe don't have an HR department, or for people who don't feel comfortable going to an HR department, or for people who just don't know who to go to. Because as we discussed earlier, we've inherited this historical practice of being easy to work with and doing whatever you're told. And sometimes that makes it really uncomfortable for us as creators or as performers to say no, or to reach out and tell someone when something feels like it has violated our personal boundaries. So the Ned is here. This is something that we have put in this document to offer a way to teach performers to self-advocate. The NED stands for non-equity deputy. If you're an equity house and you're working with entirely an equity cast and crew and they have an equity deputy of their own, that's awesome. But if you're not, we should be offering mentorship and ways to teach people to reach out and to improve their situation and get help. So the non-equity deputy is a peer level reporting process. Will be somebody in the ensemble who is voted upon by the entire ensemble. So this is somebody who's elected. And generally we hope that your cast elects a Ned within the first week. If nobody knows each other, you can take a little bit of time. If everybody knows each other and they're all like, Bill, that's a random name that I came up with. So if anybody in this room is named Bill, I'm sorry, I was not intending to call you out. If everybody in the room is like, you know what, Bill's on it. He's mentored me before. He knows what he's doing. He understands the CRP. He's somebody that we all look up to, then great, day one, they can elect Bill. That's awesome. But you can also take time as your ensemble to talk about, here are the things we want in a Ned, and then get to know each other so that electing a Ned is fruitful and it's not random and just who do you know right now on day one. So this is somebody who is elected hopefully within the first week. You can extend that if necessary for your cast. And this is somebody who's in the cast, who's a peer, who will then be a part of anonymous reporting whenever possible. So the Ned's job is to become familiarized with this document, the Colorado Standards for Theater, and the CRP, the Concern Resolution Path, and any policies that are specifically applicable to your show. And they'll be there to, whenever anybody has a concern, they can go to the Ned, and then the Ned can either fill them in on, oh, here's what the document says, here's how we should move forward with this, or the Ned can then be responsible for anonymously bringing that concern to the next level, to the stage manager, to the director, to whomever it is appropriate to report to at that moment. So they are a liaison between the cast and the crew and the stage management and the producing entity itself for issues that are brought up and need to be brought to attention. And it's really hopeful that they can protect an anonymity as often as possible. If the concern is, hey, my dressing room's lights are out, but since this is my first big gig, I don't want to be whiny about it, that's hard to protect anonymity because the one dressing room's lights are out. But in more personal issues, anonymity is a lot easier to protect. So the Ned will then report concerns that are raised to them and follow up with people, follow up with the person who brought the concern forward, follow up with the CRP, and communicate what's happening. So that's really key, is they will document and communicate what's being done to address concerns. If it's something like my dressing room light is out and I bring that concern one day and the next day nothing happens, I, as the person who has the concern, know that nothing has happened. But if I'm being harassed and I've reported it and then somebody says, don't worry, we're dealing with it, I don't know if it's actually being dealt with or if I'm just being told that to be quiet. So the NED is there to do that reporting and to communicate with the person. So if I brought a concern up about Bill again, now he's not an awesome mentor. Now he's harassing me and teasing me in ways that are really making me feel unsafe while creating with Bill. I might report that to the NED, and the NED might report that to the director anonymously so that Bill can be spoken to and just not necessarily like personal clashing way, but in a way that says like, hey, you're making jokes like this and that's making people uncomfortable. We're having an educational moment about this. And then the NED can report back to the person who raised the concern and say, you know what, Bill has been spoken to. So they know, the person who brought the concern forward knows that something has happened. The goal for the NED is to respond to concerns as quickly as possible, to give people contact information. So if Bill is the NED now, I need to come up with a different name. If Bobby is the NED now, Bobby will then give their phone number to everyone and say, I'm comfortable with you contacting me at these times on these days. Because I might have an issue at rehearsal that doesn't really hit me until I get home. I can't always respond in the moment because fight, flight, or freeze happens. And sometimes we can't even mentally process what triggered it until later. So the NED should be available and able to be reached. And that doesn't mean at 3 a.m. The NED should also be clear with people when you can reach out to them and how. And this, we hope, will really help transparency within our industry so that people who have concerns know that their concerns are being taken care of. They're not sitting and festering and feeling like nothing's happening and nothing's being said and nothing's being dealt with. And they're also not sitting there and festering and feeling like they can't say anything, which then allows that person of concern to potentially go out and perpetrate other harms against other individuals, because we know things have been dealt with. That being said, it is not necessarily the NED's job to solve the problem. The NED is there for creating an anonymous reporting system, a peer support network, and documentation and transparency with what's happening. You're not picking a random cast member who is then going to go over the stage manager's head or over the director's head or over the producer's head to solve problems in their own vigilante way. I think I would like to pause there. I have not been following the chat.
There's a lot of great stuff going on. So one of the things that came up, the mayor brought up, you know, what do we do when we have a 2-person show or a 1-person show about the NED? I can share with you, Mayor and others, we have oftentimes at CU, and I had a situation happen at a festival this past, right before March, in February, where we had, it was solo work, right? Of the company at CU, the company decided to have 2 NEDs. So, you know, and this would be a bigger cast where a NED would be, Amanda Rose said, you know, part of the NED's role is to be an advocate for, Amanda Rose said, performers and the, you know, the stage crew, the stage, you know, the team that is working, you know, the ASMs and the people that are working backstage and helping set up things. And so we've had situations at CU where we've had NEDs who have been part of production, and we've had NEDs who are part of part of the company, the acting company. And that's been really helpful. And oftentimes the acting company will go to the production folks go to the acting Ned. So that I think Lisa, you brought up a great, you know, somebody outside, you brought up like an outside person in the chat altogether, but maybe an outside person, performers and production. At the solo situation where I was, we decided it was going to be somebody, it was somebody on the production end of it that we identified as the Ned, together as the company of the people that were working on this solo thing. And we decided that together. And the situation I was in, they had never even heard of a Ned. So we worked that out together. Oops,
sorry, Tammy.
No, I was just going to say, yes, and I'd love to hear from you all too, because some people had some great ideas in the chat. And if other people have ideas about this, please like raise your hand or let us know you want to say something.
And I also see down here that somebody was bringing up mediators, and that's actually suggested in the CRP within our document.
Yeah.
That a mediator is brought in, and we also talk about mentoring.
Yeah.
So who was I last? I'm gonna pick a new name. If Jane has been acting towards me in a way that makes me feel unsafe in my creative community, Jane and I might need to talk about that, but I might not know how, or Jane might not know how. And so then we can bring in a mediator. And we also talk about a mentor. And the mentor is somebody that Jane respects. And that mentor is then there to help use this as an educational moment to teach Jane why whatever it was that she said is upsetting, and to talk about respecting boundaries and establishing boundaries. So that way it's not necessarily punitive. We're teaching our industry to be better. And sometimes that doesn't work, and I want to acknowledge that too. And that's when we move up to levels 2 and 3 in the CRP, is when that mentorship and that educational moment doesn't take.
It's not working. So the communication isn't working. I think the other thing, the important thing, thank you, Amanda Rose. And yes, if you all on the call, because I'm just seeing the little band of all the boxes, if you want to use the raise hand feature in Zoom, if you know how to do that, you want to raise your hand, Erin Joy or Amanda Rose will call on you, and we'd love to hear from you. So please use that. You just go down to, how does this work? If you don't know how to use it,
you can go to the participants panel. And if you are not a co-host, if you're a co-host, you don't have this option. But if you, there should be a blue button that says to raise your hand, along with the yes, no's, go slowers, all of those. There should be an option. Or what I said is you can also just write in the chat, hey, I'd like to talk. That's the easiest way.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. We're all kind of a community here, so that's great too. Yes, and you know, Amanda Rose, I will use Jane. I will continue to use Jane as the name here since Jane. It's important that Jane identifies who that mentor will be. The mentor is not assigned to Jane. That Jane chooses somebody that they, you know, Amanda Rose says, respect, they trust, they can go to. And the Ned, the underlined bullet of our Ned definition, or our traits or qualities of a good Ned, it says the Ned understands that their role is one of service and not a position of power or status, of service to the communication, to the company, to the production. And if the Ned doesn't know the answers, then the Ned knows who to go to get the answers.
And I believe Ben asked in the chat, how can we guarantee that the Ned will maintain a position of respect/authority within the hierarchy of a non-union theater in particular? As Tammy just said, it's not like a high position. It's a position of a liaison or an advocate. And I have been involved in productions where midway through the run, the cast decided they wanted to elect another Ned, and that's okay. Do what serves the people who are supposed to be being served. And I have also had Neds come to me and say, you know what, I'm getting too close to what's happening. I can't do this. And we've elected a new Ned, and that's fine. The goal of the Ned is to be somebody who's embedded in the community, serving the community, being a liaison, and helping everybody have a way to communicate their concerns. So if the position of the Ned or the person in that position becomes a concern, then the most helpful way, the best way to serve that community is to bring on a new Ned. And yes, I see, what does the Ned do if they are the ones involved in a concern? And I've dealt with that. And in that situation, follow the CRP. You don't have to go to the Ned for level 1. You can go to the person directly, or you can go to, if the Ned is the person of concern, they can go to the assistant stage manager or the stage manager, or find a mediator in the cast who they believe could help them out in the situation. And in that case, it would be up to, if they can all solve it in their own chat at level 1, great, let it go. If it needs to go to level 2, then they bring it to the stage manager and whoever your production company lists at level 2, and then it becomes documented as, here's what the concern was, here's what we did to solve it. This is, again, for transparency, and it doesn't have to be the stage manager. It can be an ASM, it could be directly the director. It's whoever your production company chooses to list at that level 2. It could be Bill, the box office guy who's in the building at all times. But if it's not the Ned, we still want to make sure that it's documented. And if the concerns are brought to Bill, the box office guy, because he's at level 2, we want to solve that, if we can, with anonymity, so that there's no fear of reprisal. Did a new chat question come in? Does that suffice as an answer?
Yeah,
Both
I think
Ben and Bernie who were asking those questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. I think the important thing, Amanda Rose, you touched on it too, is this idea, and I would imagine that a lot of people on the call already do this, is the importance of documentation. That yes, we're trying to get better at communicating, and that we're making sure that we document the process, because we all know that when we get into the creative process, our minds can, like when we get in those heat, you know, our lizard brain can take over and we can forget those things. And, you know, but our body knows when we're in a situation where we're getting hurt, or we feel a little bit rocked off of our balance. And I think this notion of making sure that we document everything, we keep track of it, so we can go back and, you know, go, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, how can I get better from this? And that the documentation of it becomes really important. And the cultivation of, we are going to be communicators here. That's something at CU in the Department of Theater and Dance we've really committed to, is being better communicators. So rather than, you know, you leave or shutting it down, we open up the doors. We open up the doors and say, okay, we're going to stop and we're going to figure this out. We're going to figure it out. And if we can't figure it out, then we'll figure out how to figure it out. So, and again, this is great. We want to hear from you about what's worked for you with the Ned. And it feels like the Ned is super helpful. Okay. Is that good, Amanda Rose? There?
I'm still trying to get caught up on the chat,
Okay.
but I think we have responded to all the questions.
Okay.
That
yes, and I've got lost too, because we've had some issues with our interpreters being able to see each other, so I've been dealing with that. So if you have a question that hasn't been answered, go ahead and retype it in the chat if you would. Thanks.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes, please. Thank you.
That'd be great. I'm going to, just in respect of time, and so we keep sharing and listening. We are also going to talk a little bit about basic health and safety concerns on Sunday. I hope people who can spare the time on Sunday can come and join us, because that's really an open forum about how people are feeling about health and safety right now and COVID-19. I did want, and my team, we wanted to make a note here that in the document, in our theater standards document, there is a standard that has to do with basic health and safety. And the goal is, with careful planning, we endeavor to create spaces that are, and processes for auditions, rehearsals, performances that are physically, emotionally, and psychologically as safe as possible. Now, obviously, there are things that are shifting as we speak right now in terms of safety. There are things in the standard that, you know, we intend to make sure that spaces are safe, and that safety is a topic of conversation that we discuss. So we will talk more about this on Sunday. I wanted to bring it up here because this is something frequently we are asked about. And, you know, we were in a situation recently where people said, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And our answer was, yes, you know, if that, talk about it with your team and include it, because things are changing drastically in the area of safety. The standard is that we will strive to promote basic health and safety practices by providing the following. And we have, you know, like toilets and sinks with soap and water, particularly important right now, access to, you know, ADA compliance, reasonable working temperature, and the basic things that actually, those of you that are familiar with the Actors Equity Association standards, these are really in compliance with those in a lot of ways. Like I said, lots of things are changing, and we're going to talk more, and we want to hear from you about concerns you're having right now about how you are doing theater, how you're approaching safety, or maybe everybody's doing it on Zoom. Amanda Rose is actually directing something for CU that is going to be, it's a special remote thing, but maybe you could speak about how you're using health and safety in that production, Amanda Rose. You could share that with the group of how you're thinking about health and safety.
I'm going to stop you for just a second. And Kara, the interpreter, just so you know, I'm going to take you off of being a co-host. I think your video will still show, but what are the issues? So that way you can pin the other interpreter instead of making a spotlight. That's what's going on in the background. So I think this will work if I take you off of being a co-host, Kara.
Okay, great.
All right, and I think we can still see her video. The grays box for, okay, I think we're all set now. Thank you.
Are we good? Okay, great. You guys are doing, thank you, Michelle and Kara, so much. Thank you. All right.
I got sidetracked by the interpreter conversation. Sorry.
That's all right.
You called on me for...
I just asked you if you want to just basically, basic health and safety. When you are directing the show that you're directing right now at CU for this fall, how are you thinking about basic health and safety, or are you? How's that going?
Yeah, so directing at CU is interesting because CU has its own policies and procedures that we have to follow. But one of the big things that we're taking into consideration is the sense of safety as well as physical safety in accordance with all of the health and safety guidelines that have been unfolded by the state and by the university. So one of the things that I've been working on is I've had meetings with everyone on my production and design teams, and everyone, I have a puppetry crew, and everyone on the puppetry crew to understand where their personal boundaries are and what would make them feel safe. So so for me, I'm taking what's outlined in the document and then extending that to how do you need the space to be in order to feel safe collaborating, and taking their needs into consideration as much as possible. And I think that that's something that is really important because I have my own bodily bubble and I have asthma, so my bubble might be bigger than some people's bubbles. But there are also people who have autoimmune disorders, and I'm not going around saying, tell me everything that makes you at risk. I'm asking, what will make you feel safe being in this specific sized space with this amount of people under the guidelines that we have been given by the state and by the university? Because safety really, as well as actual factual scientific safety, which is a whole evolving thing as our understanding of this virus changes, safety also is a mental and physical state. And I might be protected by the guidelines of the university and guidelines of the state, but if I don't feel safe, I can't do my best as a creator and I can't contribute fully to the project at hand. So that has been one of my approaches. I think that's the biggest approach that I would recommend, is talk to your people. And this comes from me as an intimacy choreographer as well. Let people establish their own boundaries, because everybody's boundaries are different and they shouldn't have to validate their boundaries for you or for me or for anyone else. Their boundaries are perfect just where they are. And it's within my capacity as a creator and as a director. No boundaries are so overwhelming that I can't meet that creative challenge while protecting the artists involved in my projects. So that's been kind of my approach.
That's great. I mean, I think it's important that you're flexible and that you're, I think the thing we're learning is we're all operating under different guidelines, or, we have to make sure that we're following those and then just making sure that people are safe and comfortable, right? So I think that's helpful. I think we could also, Amanda Berg-Wilson out there, do you want to talk a little bit about how you have proceeded with health and safety with your production that you're doing right now? Are you out there? Is she out there? I just totally called on her out of the blue.
No, I'm here. I just want to get to a quieter place.
Okay, great. Are
So
you
give
on
me-
golf course?
I'm out double sort of multitasking as a mom right now.
Oh,
so
great.
I'm outside with my daughter, and I'm just going to move into a quieter place, and then I would love to talk about it.
Okay, so why don't you move to a quieter place? We'll do a quick chat check-in and then hear from you here. So great. I think, so health and safety, everybody. Thank you, Amanda Rose. And we would like to hear more from you about that on Sunday when we talk more specifically about how people are feeling. And we're going to go into breakout rooms with groups. We're going to ask you to identify with, the group that you'd like to have the conversation with: stage managers, production, front of house, performers, directors, and sort of have that conversation of what does it mean to feel safe in the space. So Sunday, yes. And some of you, Laura, thank you so much on the chat. Some of you have experiences to bring to the table about health and safety, and we want to hear about that. So real quick to wrap up until Amanda Berg gets to her place. And I want you all to know that we've touched on 3 things that right now they seem to be working. And Amanda Rose and I have sort of elucidated for you how they have been working and how we've been hearing back from people how they work, about the NED, the CRP, stage intimacy. I'd like to just add about the stage intimacy, and Amanda Rose touched on that, is there are groups of intimacy choreographers, and there are a lot of people who have been our stage movement educators, the Association for Theater Movement Education, that these people have been doing this work before the work was codified. And so there are a lot of people out there, whoever asked in the chat, how do I know who an intimacy? There are intimacy coaches available through these organizations. And then there are people that do intimacy choreography and staging that may not be listed with that group. I know that we have some, Amanda Rose, and we have others in town and in our region that may not be listed with that organization, that they have experience in the work. But these are some of the other areas in our document. Hopefully you'll all take a look at it, about auditions, agreements, harassment, audience in front of house. We have to think about that. Dressing rooms, diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. We're going to hear a lot more about that from Lisa Young and her team. And Lisa, you and your group, you are teaching us a whole lot, and you're going to help us grow and be better, as Amanda Rose says. Special considerations when we have to deal with violence, high-risk physical theater. I think all theater is physical. So when we're dealing with theater, how we are physically in the space together, intimacy, nudity, choreography, these are all areas of our document that we're not going to cover today, but we invite you to take a look at and share with us your thoughts about that. So now, Amanda, if you're around, Amanda Berg-Wilson, she was able to use the document and use parts of the document. Catamounts is doing this show out on a golf course in Westminster right now. And Amanda Berg Wilson had Amanda Rose and I come to their first rehearsal and talk to them a little bit about the process. And then I think it would be great, Amanda, if you're somewhere where you can talk to us outside with your daughter, being the fabulous person that you are, and tell us a little bit about how you used it.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to just apologize in advance for not using my video and for any sort of extraneous noise, but I am sort of multitasking the last day of summer with this meeting right now. And I know so many of us balance this work and family world. So thank you in advance for everybody's patience. I just want to say that I'm so grateful because when we talked earlier this summer with the Rocky Mountain Amazing Committee that I just said, I'm ready to use this even if it's not a document that's totally set yet. And they were really generous around just allowing me the opportunity to just go ahead and use it. And so we introduced it. We are right now producing a socially distanced, very safe piece in collaboration with the City of Westminster at their Legacy Ridge Golf Course. And we wanted to make sure that we got this document into play, in particular because we knew that we were going to be producing in some very non-traditional circumstances. And it's been our experience that that's really when we need there to be really good communication paths, and when we really need to empower our artists to be able to bring to us situations in which they need additional support or that need additional addressing because they are outside of the parameters of regular theater. So we have implemented a Ned, and that has probably been, I think, our best takeaway from this experience, because it really has empowered our cast to address things which need addressing, which are just coming up not because of any sort of lack of preparation on our part or any sort of negligence on our part, but just because we are operating a little bit in new territory. So already we have had 2 situations in which our Ned, who was elected by the cast pretty late in the last week, the first week of rehearsal, and he already has brought 3 separate situations to our attention, which have been immediately addressed in changes in our operating procedures. We are, of course, in this moment using non-equity talent because of the equity's limitations around issuing contracts. And we're a small company. We're a small company that when we do use equity talent, we're just issuing special appearance contracts. So we are one of those companies that doesn't have a really sort of formal HR department or the benefit of the equity protocols. So that Ned has been really sort of game changing for us. I cannot recommend that enough. I think that we all sort of deal with situations that we're not exactly sure when they cross from just sort of dressing room kind of chatter into a situation that needs addressing. And we really have benefited from formalizing that process. And I think that everybody it hasn't been a bad thing. It's been a really, really empowering thing. And actually, frankly, not just for our artists, but for us as producers to feel like we have those communication channels in which we can really understand the experience of our artists and really address them, rather than feeling like after the fact we're learning about things that we could have done better, that's too late to address. So that's sort of my primary experience with the document thus far, is really really being able to take advantage of that Ned position. We haven't had to, fortunately, escalate anything in the conflict resolution path, though that is something that we introduced the first day of rehearsal, and it makes me feel like were we to have not failed, but sort of not adequately addressed something in the first iteration of it being brought to our attention, it makes me feel good that there's a process beyond that. But we're fortunate in that we haven't, at this point, we have not had to escalate anything.
That's great. I mean, I think that that's part of the whole purpose, right? Is to create that pathway to have better communication and to figure it out at the very beginning. So I think it's great. I mean, that's one of the purposes of the document, or components of the document really are to make sure that we're completely transparent with each other, and we figure out how to communicate when things are bothering us or not. So I love it, Amanda. Thank you so much for sharing that with the group. Do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, just the last thing that I would add is that, I know that there's a lot of unknowns right now around how we proceed and whether or not to proceed in making theater. And, as some of us choose to proceed and we're gonna encounter things that we could not have anticipated because they're outside of the boundaries of how we've been trained for years and years to make theater. So in particular, it feels like this is the best time to use this document because it's going to allow us the opportunity to address those things that we don't already have codified practices around in a really systematic way. And in a way that I think, I would say that our artists feel, even as they're on, many square miles of a golf course, dealing with weather and coyotes and just all kinds of really interesting new things. I hope and I feel fairly confident that they feel like they have the space to address things without being fussy or not sort of being aware of what they've been asked to do in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of being put in a position where we're going to be figuring it out as things are changing, figuring out how to make theater. And I think your company is such a great example, and it's great to hear from you about what you're learning in that process too. So thank you so much. And thank you for supporting the work and sharing with us what your experiences are. There's Betty brought up a really good thing in the chat, I think, and I'm going to read it about, can I read it here? Or Amanda Rose, can you read Betty's?
Yeah, there was a previous question as well that I want to jump back to really quickly because otherwise I will forget. And it was about the difference between comfort and safety and how that weird words mean different things to different people.
Yep.
I like to stay away from comfortable because as theater artists, oftentimes our job is to poeticize uncomfortable situations. I can inhabit discomfort. I can live in the uncomfortable given circumstances that are written for my character. And I might be uncomfortable with it, but if it's not passing my boundary and it's not triggering a personal trauma, I can inhabit that uncomfortable circumstance in a way that's safe for me. So as an intimacy choreographer, we talk a lot about safety as identifying your personal boundaries, clarifying your personal boundaries with the people with whom you are collaborating, and respecting the boundaries that have been communicated to you.
Yeah.
And also understanding that boundaries change.
Yeah.
My boundaries might be very different with my partner than they would be with Tammy, who's a faculty at the institution that I'm a student at. And they might be very different with Tammy at that institution than with the person I share an office with. And that's okay. Boundaries change. And as long as those boundaries are clearly communicated with my partners, and as long as I am allowed as an artist to engage in the introspection, to identify my boundaries and to feel safe, feel that I will not be punished or receive punitive action for establishing a personal boundary, then as long as I'm able to do that, I can inhabit the uncomfortable circumstances of the performance in which I am engaging. Because very, very rarely do we create or participate in art where every single character is comfortable all the time. And oftentimes the art that we create deals with content that is uncomfortable. But I can push through discomfort to grow, whereas breaking my boundaries could break a part of me or create a trauma. So yeah.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to jump in there really quickly because we've been dealing with this. This is Amanda Berg-Wilson with the Catamounts. We've been dealing with the issue of actual safety versus feeling of safety. And I think that that's a really interesting space to have to navigate, because I can tell a cast member that they are in actuality quite safe, but if they don't feel safe, then that affects my working environment, right? So my sort of being like, oh, you're fine, those coyotes are not gonna bother you, you know, is different from their feeling okay, particularly in a work in which we're already quite vulnerable. So I think that we as producers have an obligation not only to guarantee actual safety, but also to create an environment in which folks feel safe.
I think 100%.
Yeah.
And that's where those personal boundaries, from my vantage, where I'm coming from here, that's where those personal boundaries need to be established and respected. Because if I'm not respecting your personal boundaries, you will never feel safe.
Yeah.
Because I have broken your boundaries, and that teaches you that I am not willing to respect your needs, your personal needs for actual or emotional safety, or feeling safe, I think you called it. And then the question, Tammy, that you wanted to bring
I see
up.
here. It's about, Betty asked the question about training of the Neds, about culturally sensitive issues, or culturally sent to be, if we have a white Ned in a company. And Betty and all, so part of we do not, at Ramasa, we are open and we are working closely with Lisa and her team at Idea Stages in incorporating sort of the pillars. I know at CU right now, the conversation is about using the idea pillars and incorporating a knowledge for our students, our theater students, theater majors, that these are the people that are going to go out there and make theater in the future, of understanding what it means to create these standards and use these standards to work by, and understanding the pillars as established by the folks at Idea Stages, who are going to talk to us about that tomorrow. But Betty, we are working on that. That is something we're thinking about and we're talking about, and we need to make sure that we have those things in place where the Ned can learn about cultural sensitivity. They can be aware of that.
Hi, Tammy.
Yeah.
We're talking about that at 4. I think you
at 4. I'm sorry.
Tomorrow.
I'm sorry.
Okay. It's okay.
Yeah, actually, yes.
It's a lot going on. It's okay.
I'm sorry. I'm supposed to be turned off. I'm going to turn it over to Angela.
No, it's fine.
Lisa, was there more that you wanted to add?
No.
Okay.
No, we have a robust conversation going on in the chat. And I heard her just say, "Oh, Ideas will be speaking tomorrow." I'm like, "No, we're not."
Yeah. Well, to summarize, just so that it's on the recording as well, the specifics was that Ideas have the pillars established, and that is a great way of these entities working together, is to be able to offer the additional training that Betty proposed to the Neds, because there are, it actually leads right into that question of what are good skills and traits for a Ned to have, and not all companies may have that available in the people that are sort of at the table or in the cast. So I'd love to go back to Amanda and just ask, like, you mentioned how beneficial this person was, and I just wondered if you'd be able to share a couple of traits that that person who is the Ned for the Catamounts production has exhibited as a way for everybody also to be thinking about, you know, what are additional skills and traits for Neds to be able to have to make a production or help a production feel as safe as possible. Amanda, do you have a couple? Sorry, Amanda Berg-Wilson.
She may be.
Yeah, she may have popped off.
Yeah.
Well, and I see Betty bringing up a really good point, is that, you know, a lot of times it's the popular person that can be elected as a Ned, as opposed to someone that may have some additional skill sets to be able to actually hold space in a meaningful way for the cast. So that's was mentioned in the chat, and going back to using the ideas pillars as another way for you know, people to be able to have the conversation. So
Yes, and something that has worked well for us has, and I think Amanda said this too, Amanda Berg-Wilson said that they didn't choose their Ned till a little bit later, is we have a big conversation about what it means to be the Ned. And it's in the document as well, is what are the expectations, what are the responsibilities of the Ned? And we really have a serious conversation about, so it's not the popular person, it's the person that's going to commit to serving in this role for the production and for the company. And so it's not just, you know, sometimes I know, you know, when we decide the deputy for equity, we all go off, oh, you do, I haven't done, you, whatever. You know, this is we take it pretty seriously. And in the document, it's laid out that these are the things that the Ned has to be responsible for and know about. And so, you know, sometimes you have to take a little bit longer so that whoever wants to be the Ned decides, yeah, those are things that I'll commit to. So that might be helpful too. It's a little bit, we encourage the students that we work in productions to think about it and take it seriously.
Yeah. And again, just echoing in the chat about, you know, Ned is as an organization that empowers women. Ned implies other things, but that language came from the Not in Our House document that was focused on, or that was inspired by actors' equity rules and regulations as well. So a lot of the language has pulled from the equity side that has crossed over into the non-equity side, recognizing that on the call we have both equity houses as well as non-equity houses. I completely agree with Amanda Rose, and that you can call it whatever you want that works for your company, and that can be part of what you start with. And maybe it's a way into that conversation so that people have an ability to come together on accepting this is the tool that we're going to use. And then that's an exercise that the group comes up with, is, well, what do we want to call this person as a way to move through it. So in addition, like we wanted to make sure that we had time to hear any additional questions from people about the document specifically, about the standards, or even just on a very like beginning level of how, so where do we go from here? Like, you know, is everybody, I know I can't see any faces, but is everybody feeling comfortable on, if you're able to, or if you have that desire to incorporate a document like this into your rehearsal, would you like to talk about what does that literally look like at your first rehearsal? What kind of time do you allocate toward this document? Are there concerns about how much time that this document may take away from the production in the, you know, shortened amount of time frame that we have to get stuff done? That's a little bit of my producer brain kicking in there, but I'm just throwing those things out as food for thought and trying to see if there are other questions around how do we implement this? What is the next step from here? Okay, great. So everybody's gonna like go to the website and sign up and get the document, and we're good.
Nice.
Oh, it looks like Leah actually has something. Go ahead, Leah.
Hi, everybody. I was thinking a lot about the resolution aspect, but when it comes to introducing and having conversations about the Colorado Standards for Theater. So I know we've talked about it a little bit in our monthly sessions when we were trying to work out all the text and all the various processes, but I'm thinking about it again now that we're getting closer to more introductions to people outside of the general producing community. I'm thinking a lot more of like community theater organizations, youth organizations, people who are not necessarily day-to-day involved in what's happening in Colorado theater as a whole because they're so busy doing what they're doing. But to bring this to their attention as an outreach tool, what do you all think would be some solid ways of approaching if we get resistance from folks saying, why do I need to know about this? Like, how do we handle the defensiveness that may come up? If you're saying, if an actor or a crew member or a director or even a producer coming to their whole company saying, I'd like to, like, are you aware of the Colorado Standards for Theater? I'd like to, you know, use this as a tool while we're working on our work. And what happens when you get, it's not even the curious people who just don't know about, and by curious, I mean over curious, not curious theater company. Curious people who are just not aware of what it is, and they're asking the, well, what is it questions, because we can have conversations about that. What happens when we have folks who say, I don't need a tool like that, things are fine, I've never had a problem. Well, this seems, you know, I'm trying to go to like the situation of someone saying no so that I can come back with a conversation point so it doesn't stay a no.
No, I think that's great. And it sounds a little similar to another question that was posted in the chat too about, you know, what happens if a theater doesn't choose to use the standards, even if you as the either company member or cast member is, you know, trying to bring it to their attention. One of the organizations that we talked with early on is the Blue Bench that is based here in Colorado, and they deal with sexual harassment and sexual assault prevention. That is the nature of their organization. And they shared with us that they had created a program for bars, actually, for folks going into bars, both audience training, for lack of a better word, so customer training is the equivalent, as well as the staff member training and the workers and the management. And it is a very real thing that you have to break down that barrier of you know, people are bringing the document to somebody because they're doing it wrong, and that you have to address it from the place of it isn't about doing anything wrong. It's about how do we make this a better experience for all involved. And so I think a lot of it has to do with the presentation of it. If you're coming in and saying, you know, you suck, here's a document that's going to make you better, then that's not going to be as well received as you know, take some ownership by knowing what's in the document itself and being able to speak to a couple of key points that, you know, will help the experience for everybody involved from the beginning. It does seem like it will at least open the door to conversation. At the end of the day, you're still going to get people that say, no, I don't want to do it, whether it's in, you know, management says no, the producer says no, the director says no, or director says we don't have time for it. And I think that goes back to your personal choice on engaging with that organization going forward. And that's where the power of the more people that know about this and the more people that are able to engage in bringing it up, then eventually there will become that creative awareness, or not creative awareness, but eventually there'll become that awareness of, oh, this is a thing that I should be paying attention to, or I want to learn more about, and hopefully help change that mindset. So, and
I
then
also, Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I'm happy to have other people address that, because I think those are totally valid things that are worthy of conversation, of how do we, as folks who now know what this is and what's behind it, how do we leverage that and continue to get the word out about it?
I also want to offer, if you're in a cast and you've said like, hey, I learned about this great thing that could really help us communicate with each other on this production. It's called the CTS. Here it is. I would hope that our company adopts this. And they're like, no, there's nothing stopping a cast from having a Ned on their own.
Right.
And that way, that Ned can still be doing the job of protecting anonymity and documenting. And that way, if something happens that leverages or that requires a level 3 complaint, we have it documented as a community that was looking out for ourselves as artists. And one of the goals of this document is to plant the seeds of self-advocacy and community improvement in that way. If I'm on a cast and I'm like, hey guys, the theater's not using this, but we're gonna do this, what I'm doing there is I'm modeling behavior for other people to help our community improve. And I come at this as somebody who has worked in TYA for over 15 years now, Theater for Young Audiences, teaching our younger performers who enter the industry and spend how much time struggling before they find out that they can, or before they get fed up and they just decide, well, I'm going to stand up for myself because nobody else does it. Like, how many generations have we been going through of that?
Exactly.
We're done.
Yeah,
Like,
I know I'm done.
so if you're working at a company and the company's like, nah, we don't need it, you know, you can do it. You can change the company culture from within, because if you start doing this with this cast, with this ensemble, with this directing design team, people see communication improving and they see people advocating for each other, and hopefully they'll want to continue that elsewhere. And then it'll build up that, I mean, you don't want to be like, no, you have to do it. No, you have to do it. No, you have to do it, because that could gain like negative repercussions. But if the pressure builds up from within, the culture will change. Yeah.
I think that's great. I think Betty'd like to respond. I would love to hear from Betty.
I would, because Amanda Rose, I don't think it's that simple. I don't think that a cast choosing a Ned and doing it without the theater's support is as beneficial. I think it also puts a lot of stress on the cast because there is no designated time for them to meet. So that means then we're asking people to talk during breaks when they're supposed to have their downtime. And if indeed the problem happens to be in the theater company, again, that is the opposite, right, of why you all helped create these standards. So I think it's a larger problem than just get an ed and go after it yourself, or even just ignore that theater company in the future. Because I will say, because I've been there, you know, I'm an equity actor. I have protections and I have experienced harassment in a theater company, and I had all the protections and I chose not to use them. So and that's where I had it, right? I just don't know how easy it is to say to people who don't even have those protections, well, just kind of create one on your own. I just think that's a little not fully recognizing the enormity of it.
I wasn't trying to indicate that just that one action could change everything. What I'm trying to say is that if people start changing small things, like, sorry, I haven't thought it out before I worded it, so I think I came across in a way I didn't intend to. And now I'm trying to think about how to say it to come across clearly. We need to start teaching everyone in our community that we're not going to put up with it anymore. And just creating a Ned won't solve that. But it'll start, I hope, inspiring other people to apply the pressure to change. Because if just a few people are willing to apply that pressure, then those few voices aren't receiving the amplification that they need. And the purpose of the document is to plant the seeds of change so that change can start happening all over in our community. And then hopefully those, I'm trying to stick with the seeds metaphor right now and I don't know how. We're hoping that it will spread outwards in a way that permeates everything. That's our hope. That being said, it's a document. And there are bad actors out there. And I don't mean like people who can't carry a scene. And what spreading this throughout the community could do is really place pressure on the bad actors to change and to be educated. As a document and as our organization, we can't force companies to implement the document. We don't have the person resources, we don't have the financial resources, we don't have the legal recourse to be going in and forcing theaters to do what we want them to do. So we're hoping that by going in and educating other people how to advocate for the communities that aren't currently being heard, we can amplify all of that, not just the Ned. I apologize if I made it seem like just the Ned will fix everything, because we all know that one small action is not enough. And we see that still now, today, yesterday, all the time.
Yeah.
So I apologize if I made that sound oversimplistic.
No, that's great. Let's hear from Lisa. Lisa, please.
So, you know, Betty, this has been a part of what ideas from the beginning has come across as like, you know, how are you going to make people do this? You know, how are you going to make people? And I think now we are in a space where people have to want to do the change and the work. And I think we are there. I mean, as we've seen over the past few months, there are people who are saying, in the past, I have been wrong. How can I be better? And I think that's why these conversations that we're having now, these seminars that we're having now, people from all walks are a part of this. They're, especially with ideas, we are going to be walking hand in hand. I would say ideas, Ramasa, and I'm calling you Ramasa, but Colorado Theater Standards.
Ramasa.
And Ramasa, and the Colorado Theater Guild. The three of us, these three organizations walking hand in hand, this is an opportunity for us. It's extra work, of course, it's extra work for everyone. But I think it's time that we take a stop, a breath at where we are and put change into effect. And if that means, you know, we're all working a little bit, you know, 2 or 3 more hours a day out of that 24 that doesn't exist to get these, I don't have another second in my day. And, but that's the sacrifice that's going to have to come about. And I take courage from the Black Lives Matters protests and movement, where I see young white people putting their bodies in front of our brown and Black bodies. And I think that's where we are now in our community, where there are people who in the past who have benefited from the privilege of not, you know, having to need someone there talking about sexual harassment, someone there talking about, you know, racial and cultural insensitivity. You now have people who are like, I get it too, and I'm here to fight with you. So I think that is one of the next steps that we all take on training one another, coming in first day, getting into theater companies to start maybe having workshops with their cast beforehand. So there's a lot that we can be doing proactively instead of reactively. And I'm gonna stop because I know time is of the essence.
Well, and we're going to hear a lot more from you in a little bit, in like an hour almost practically. See how I got that right? Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. Angela, if I may just say one quick tiny thing to what Betty brought to it and what Amanda Rose spoke to is, for me, the work that we're doing, idea stages, Ramasa, and we can, I'm sure, name other organizations out there that are doing this work. Betty, I am with you. I am with you, like arm in arm, in that place where, as an actor for years who's been represented through the Actors Equity, I'm with you in that place. And I'm going to suggest that we're arm in arm, not just hand in hand, because I know those moments when I can't, I know that it's not right and I haven't spoken up. And I think this work, what you said, Lisa, is like a lot of this work is about empowering people to have the voice. And I might not know, like, I know what I feel in my body, but I might not know what to say. And so hopefully the work that we're doing will help people know what to say, to use their voices so that their bodies aren't in these positions where they know that it's not right anymore. And I know it's not as easy as identifying this or that, putting these things, because the culture, it has been put into place that we are made to feel like afraid if we say too much or we speak up too much. So I would like to, like, I think the work is exciting in that we're creating these bodies of language to help people go to the oh wait, let me go to, I know I need that. I'm always deferring to, the folks that give me the words to be able to say the things that I say, including many of the people on this call right now. And so I'm constantly reminding myself of that and knowing, those moments, I know those moments where I haven't stood up, or it's not necessarily not standing up, but speaking up. And I think the things that we're writing, the things that we're sharing, it is helping provide people, I think, with the language and then creating their own. Like you said, Lisa, the young people that are standing up out there and, it's like then they create their own because they can read this, they can study it, and then they can go out and they can have language of their own, which is going to be better than ours. So, we have lots of work to do.
Another thing is nothing that we are now doing is stagnant. This is not, we're here, it's in this box and we're not moving past that.
That's right.
All of these, I don't want to say ideas because it's not the organization, but all of these processes that we are working on are ongoing. They're being created and changed even as we speak today. We are talking about how do we take the pillars and the CTS and put it into schools. So then the next generation, they are already ready. When they get to the professional level, it's like, oh, no. In school, I learned that you don't talk to me like that, and I have rights and protections. Yeah. So I think we are in the birthing room right now. And I've never given birth, but for those of you who are mothers, I've seen birth. It is hard. It is messy. It is screaming, right? It's breathing and figuring it out as you go. And that's where we are. And I am just happy that we have so many resources that are coming together all at once, because we could jump into the whole cancel, culture that we have going on. Right? Just cancel them. And that does not work, because at some point, everyone will be canceled. So I'm going to stop again, because like I said, I think we have a bunch of very intelligent, brilliant people who have put, Ramasa started more than 2 years ago, and Colorado Theater Guild has been around for decades. It's time for us now to be those service organizations and do the service work. So
that's right. So we are, Angela, like 1 minute, and we want to honor people's time. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, this is, how it goes, right? We just get into the juicy parts of the conversation, and we now got to move on.
And we'll have more. We'll have more.
Well, that's the great part about this weekend. I do hope that everybody can join us for the session with IGEAs at 4 o'clock, and then tomorrow about talking about the larger conversation of safety in theater and what does that look like. And know that this is movement in that literal and figurative sense, to just kind of encapsulate we're all the metaphors that were used today. We've got seeds, we've got Neds, we've got Janes, we've got sprinklings, we've got ripple effects, right? But all of it is the movement into creating a better community for us, for us that are experiencing and living in it and creating in it. And so I thank you for your time this afternoon and look forward to having you join us again for the follow-up conversation. There are website links that are in the chat, so if you'd like to join and you haven't signed up already, that is inside the chat right now. And you can contact us at artistsafetyalliance@gmail.com if you have specific questions for Tammy, Amanda Rose, and myself. So I will stick that in the chat here in just a minute. But with that, thank you, Erin, for running a great Zoom call for us. And thanks everybody for your time.
And thank you, Kara and Michelle, for being our ASL interpreters, and all of our partners, Annie from Phamaly, Lisa from Idea Stages, Aaliyah from Colorado Theater Guild, Amanda Berg-Wilson, and yeah, thank you all so much. Hopefully we'll see you all at 4, or we'll be in the same Zoom room together. Thank you.
And if you lose the Zoom links, go to the Rocky Mountain Artists Alliance website, Artist Safety Alliance website, and click under workshops. It's all right there. Then you don't have to follow the gobbledygook links that Zoom sends you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. See you soon. Thank you.